Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's presentation of Navigating the Great Wealth Transfer, What Your Heirs Need to Know. My name is Damon King. I'm a certified financial planner professional with ChappelWood Financial Services. We are based in the Oklahoma City area, and we also have an office in Arlington, Texas, serving the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I want to introduce you to some incredible people. This is your ChappelWood Financial team. We are investment advisors, wealth managers for millionaires here at ChappelWood Financial. We've got our CEO and chief investment advisor and founder, Victoria Woods. You're going to hear from her in just a second. Of course, I've introduced myself, Damon King. I'm a certified financial planner professional. I'm also the lead instructor for ChappelWood University, which is our educational branch, which tonight's event is part of that. And Victoria and I are in the Oklahoma City office of ChappelWood, and Lisa Ward is our certified financial planner professional and wealth manager for our Arlington, Texas location. Victoria is known as the financial diva to all of her friends, family, people all over the world, maybe even people on other planets. I don't know, Victoria. Tell us a little bit about you, and what are you hoping that all of our guests get out of tonight?
Well, Damon, thank you so very much. I am so excited to be here. First of all, Damon, you do such a great job at hosting. I am so happy that we've got to sponsor and host this evening tonight. First of all, I want to congratulate every single person that is here tonight. You are investing in yourselves. And that to me is something really special. On a Wednesday night, you've taken the time to join us tonight to learn something new, to make some new friends, and hopefully have a little fun in the process. Because if we do it, it's going to be fun. The second thing is that I would like to share with you is that, I was down in Texas last week. So as much as it hurts me and pains me to relinquish this stage to these three handsome gentlemen, I was down in Texas and I got loved on so much. They shared with me ragweed. I have never had this before. I have worked for 4 days just so I could be here with you all tonight. That's how important this was to me. But my voice probably wouldn't last all night. So luckily for you, you have these three gentlemen. They're going to bring you their knowledge, their success, their experience, their relationships. And as Damon said, this is part of our ChappelWood University outreach. Why do we do this? We do this so that we can help more people. Our goal is to help you. And that's why we do this. And you're going to there's some links that I have put over in the chat. Please help yourself to those links. Anything that you want to put in the chat, please do so. And you're going to have a wonderful night tonight. We're happy to be here. We're happy to sponsor this for you. So enjoy the evening. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Victoria. All right, now on to the reason why you guys are really here. So a little bit of housekeeping about tonight. Feel free throughout tonight's presentation to use the chat or Q&A buttons in your toolbar, probably at the bottom of your screen. Hover over that, and if a question pops into your head, it's best to just type it out right then. Type out your question. I will be monitoring and making sure that we have all the questions. We are going to save the questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes of tonight's presentation, so we'll get to all those questions, and we are going to prioritize the questions that were submitted in advance. Many of you submitted questions in advance. So thank you so much for that. But feel free to ask your questions in the chat or Q&A buttons, and we will get to as many of them as we can tonight. All right. I would like to introduce...
Damon, before we get started, somebody just texted me that the chat is disabled. So while we're doing that, it's good for us, but I guess the participants, it's disabled. So while we get started on the presentation, if you could look at that.
Yeah, I will do what I can to fix that. All right.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you for letting me know that. I'd like to introduce, first of all, Mr. Matthew Larson. Mr. Matthew Larson is an investment consultant with City National Rockdale. City National Rockdale is one of our top, if not our top, investment strategist for high net worth and ultra high net worth families. So Matthew, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to allow you to share your screen. Take it away.
Perfect. Damon, thank you very much for that introduction. It's really great to be here. We're really excited. Glad everyone was able to participate. Like Damon said, my name is Matthew Larson. I'm an investment consultant with City National Rockdale. I'm here, really want to introduce my firm very briefly, share with you kind of what we do. And then I want to get into just a brief, very high level economic overview. Let y'all kind of get inside our heads, start thinking of the way we think about what's going on in the economy, what's going on in the markets, and how that might affect some of the portfolios that we manage here at City National Rockdale. That's me. I'm pretty boring. If we ever want to get to know me, you can go ahead and reach out to David or Victoria and we can talk about myself. My firm, though, City National Rockdale. In a nutshell, what we do is we build custom portfolios specifically to achieve goals and objectives set out by investors. And we only do this through independent advisors, like the team we have right here at ChappelWood. We do this because we find it very important that every client that we're managing money for, buying stocks, selling bonds, whatever we might be doing, has an advisor who's looking at their entire financial picture, taking into account every aspect that is necessary to be very successful. You can have the best investment portfolio, but if it doesn't line up with a plan that is set out through specific goals and objectives, then it's probably not the best for you. And we take that to heart, and that's why we're set up the way we are. Sort of a quick overview of the firm, kind of set up how we operate. Here's a really good graphic. I kind of split this screen up into 3 pieces. Right here on the left-hand side of your screen where it says financial advisor and client, that's alluding to what I just mentioned. We only work with people with a financial advisor, and everyone who comes with us comes to us like a team. The second 2 circles, the one in the middle and the one on the right, if you were to draw an imaginary big circle around those 2, that's the firm, City National Rockdale. We're about 300 plus individuals, got a lot of CFAs, CFPs, we got some JDs, some really high-level specialists, one of which you're going to hear from a little bit later on. And collectively, what we do is think about building and managing those custom portfolios for really high net worth individuals. And for us, that is those folks that have about $1 million or more to invest. Here on the first half of that middle circle there, I'm going to call that a lime wedge because I'm down in Texas, in Houston, Texas specifically, and it's still summer. So I'm going to reference lemon and lime here in this presentation. The lime represents me and my team. What we do is we focus primarily on the upfront. We analyze clients' current portfolios, do a deep dive into their goals and objectives, and really come up with some baseline ideas for how we would change or alter current portfolios to meet those levels of success at a higher level. The lemon wedge is something that really sets us apart here at City National Rockdale. It represents the private portfolio management team and every client who comes to us through an independent advisor. They're going to be teamed up with a group of individuals who actually buy and sell and activate the portfolio on behalf of the client. And they'll get to know those professionals. They'll meet with them on a regular basis to find updates on what's going on in their lives and make sure that all the goals and objectives that are set out at the beginning stay valid and that the portfolio continues to operate in a way that best suits those goals and objectives. In the chevron right below those 2 lemon and lime wedges, represents a group of individuals that I'm super excited to have here at City National Rockdale. One of them you're going to get to talk to here in a second. These are those specialists I mentioned earlier, attorneys, CPAs, and their role here is to work with our advisors and their clients on some higher level financial planning, trust, and estate structuring, whether it be setting up specific trusts, or if you happen to be selling a business or you are a business owner, you might just be considering a business. We have specialists that focus on you and your needs to help execute those at a very high level. Over here on the right-hand side, I'll call this the blueberry where it says Investment Strategy Committee. This just represents all of my, I guess the best term I've come up with so far is super nerds. These are the folks in the background, what they're doing is they're looking at balance sheets and cash flow statements from the companies, the stocks that we own on behalf of clients. They're specialists in different asset classes like high yield municipal bonds, which is my favorite asset class and the most boring. So if you ever have problems sleeping, give Damon or Victoria a shout. I'll get you over a research paper on high yield municipal bonds. And if you make it to page 3, I'll be incredibly impressed. Altogether, again, that's my firm, that's City National Rockdale. What I want to do now, very briefly, is just talk in general, like I said, at a high level, about what we're seeing out in the economy, some of our expectations, and how that should affect client portfolios going forward. Now, starting on this screen, for reference, I've put up a number of specific attributes that we've been looking at, or specific key markers from the economy. We've got here each of those reference points in the middle, highlighted in a light blue. And again, for reference purposes, I'm showing some 2022 numbers. So we're looking at starting off at a real GDP growth, and you see that it was about 2.1% in 2022. And we've seen that number come down. We've expected for quite some time that the market and really the economy would enter into at least a moderate recessionary environment. And what that means is essentially a negative growth in GDP. Some of that due to all of the higher interest rates that has come out most recently, specifically from the Fed. Not to say that we're expecting some sort of market crash, but really a pullback in economic activity. And we still do believe that, I'll give you that up front, that we could be entering a what we refer to as a mild recession, or even just an economic slowdown. But that's not to say that there's not opportunities out there on the investment front. And it's not even to say that we're expecting bigger pullbacks in the stock market in general. I am going to kind of highlight here a couple of things, specifically part of the reason for that drawback and for that expectation. You see here in the second row where it says corporate profit growth. We saw in 2022 about a 5.1%. And our expectations, they're starting to come in line with this, of about -2 to 1% when we close out the year here of 2023. Also mentioned interest rates right now. We've seen the most significant raising of interest rates in over 20 years just in the past 18 months. It is very specific as to why interest rates have come up. This is a tool the Federal Reserve uses, and they use it frequently. A lot of times they've cut rates in order to help the economy. This time they were really trying to slow things down. They really wanted to tamp down inflation. And so far they've done just that. But those higher interest rates have been a drag on overall economic growth. We see the end of that hike period, or the period where they're continuing to raise rates. We might see one more hike here before the end of the year, but we think 2024 might be the top for those interest rates. And there could be expectations at the end of 2024 into 2025 of bringing those rates back down. This piece right here, I think, all encompasses kind of how we come to these conclusions. And then I want to talk just a little bit about how we act on them and set a few more expectations going forward. This is called our City National Rockdale speedometers. And what you're looking at here are 20 leading economic indicators. These are things that if you watch financial news, or to be frank, recently, any news, these are things that are being talked about. We've got things up here like in the top left where it says monetary policy. We've got yield curve. Oops, sorry about that. We've got inflation, big topic of conversation over the past few years. And the way that we communicate our feelings about this, we put this piece out on a monthly basis. We color code each indicator to say what we think this particular aspect of the economy is telling us to expect over the next 6 to 9 months. Green would be good. We're all clear as far as that indicator is pointing. Neutral, not good nor bad, and then red is negative. And as you can see here, we don't have any green. Again, going back to that expectation of at least a mild recession, maybe just an economic slowdown. But I want to point out some of the positive aspects that have come up really just in the past few months. You can see in each speedometer here, we have a black speedometer marker. And in a couple of these, you also see a light gray one. That light gray represents where this indicator was pointing us, at least, last month. So anytime you see a black marker to the right of a gray marker, that's improvement. And we've seen some significant improvement here in the very recent future. One being there in monetary policy, when that alludes back to what I was talking about. We think the Fed is almost done raising interest rates. And therefore, the pressure that's putting on the overall economy should abate to some extent. We also saw some of that corporate profit growth that I mentioned earlier was really coming down, part of the expectation of that overall softening or light recession period. We actually saw a little bit of improvement in that. We also continue to see inflation come down, which from the beginning was the stated reason for the Fed raising rates, putting this pressure on the economy and really wanting things to slow down. So we're taking this all in, looking for different opportunities and what it might tell us about what we can do within client portfolios. I want to end my little section here just to give you kind of an overall breakdown, talk about kind of what we see and how we see things playing out, specifically from the GDP perspective. Right here, you can see on the left-hand side, this line graph, starting back in 2022, represented by GDP. This green line shows that significant regrowth coming out of 2020 and going into 2021 and 2022, starting to pull back. And we saw that pressure, and that's where we started to get this expectation of a mild recession or a slow growth environment. And what you see here is right where we're at. What we're expecting going forward from a probability standpoint is still a mild recession is the highest probability. Normal recession, something you usually think of when we start talking about recession, where you see big sell-offs in the marketplace, you see high unemployment, you see really low consumer spending. We have very low probability of that occurring here during this particular economic cycle, and then slow growth making up the balance there. And you can see here some of our expectations going forward. We've got the actual numbers from Q1, Q2 stronger than we had expected, and we're coming into an environment where we continue to see the slowdown, but to a lesser extent than we had originally expected. So to kind of wrap my section up, we're continuing with a thesis of a mild recession or slow growth environment somewhere at the end of this year, beginning of next year, but followed likely very quickly by a return to a more normal growth environment where we can, quote unquote, kind of get back to normal. Over that time, we should see some significant opportunities, specifically in the stock market. But right now, we're really excited about some of the things we can do just within bonds, able to pick up yield numbers that we haven't seen on real high quality bonds for multiple decades. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to one of those specialists that I had referred to earlier. Coming on now is going to be Mr. Rob Erickson. He's part of that Private Wealth Solutions group that I mentioned before, and he comes to us from the nerd world of the attorney. So Rob, if you would, please take it away.
And real quick, before you do, Rob, I'm just going to remind everybody, you can submit questions. We already have a couple of questions submitted. We'll get to those later, but go ahead and submit your questions via the chat or Q&A buttons down at the bottom of your screen. Take it away, Rob.
Great. Thank you, Matthew and Damon. So just to get going on the topic that we came here for tonight, I want to discuss a little bit about how passing assets to the next generation is not only going to be most beneficial with certain vehicles, but also some common pitfalls that we see when these individuals do pass on wealth to the next generation. So a little bit about myself. I'm a former practicing attorney. I've been out of the formal practice of law here and doing this on the financial institution side for about a decade now. It's all everything that I like to do on the planning side without the writing of the actual documents. You'll hear me talk about that a little bit tonight. We are not going to be able to actually write these documents, but what we can do is we can advise on the different paths, and we can educate you on the way that we can set up these estate plans for you going forward, and potentially what may or may not work in your situation. It's towing the line here of, not tax or legal advice, but educating and being able to give you that roadmap that's best going to be able to suit you going forward. So with that being said, I want to start now talking a little bit about trust. But before I do, I want to back up and kind of give a 30,000 foot view of how we're able to pass assets, and a couple things here to keep in mind. First, we have a lifetime exclusion. That's going to be sky high these days. $13 million, roughly it's 12.96 is the current exemption of what we can give away during life and at death. So those totaled together up to 12.96. That is all set to sunset here when we wake up January 1st, 2026. As soon as we wake up that day, that exemption is going to go back down to the pre-Tax Cut and Jobs Act era, where it was 5 million, but it's going to be adjusted up for inflation. We don't necessarily have a hard number on what this is going to be, but by most estimations, it's going to be somewhere between 6.5 and 7 million per person. So those are the limits that we're going to be discussing for the federal tax, federal estate tax. There's also many other states that have inheritance taxes or a state estate tax. We can get into those. You can bring those types of things if you have assets in other states. Bring those to Victoria and Damon and everyone at the ChappelWood Financial, and we can go through that and discuss a little bit of what your options are, because there are certain states with very low exemptions. Texas is not going to be one of those. Oklahoma is not going to be one of those. So for the most part, what any of the estate tax or inheritance tax that we would run into is going to be at that federal level. To be able to take advantage of, for a married couple, of both those exemptions, things are going to need to be structured a certain way. This could be either through a revocable living trust, where we're giving assets into what we'll call a credit shelter and a marital trust, or it can be set up through a will-based plan through what we'll call portability. That is going to be an estate tax return that is filed upon the first person to pass, and we're going to save that exemption amount for the other to be able to use upon the second passing. For a married couple, estate taxes, if everything is structured correctly, are not going to be due until 9 months after the second spouse passes away. For single individuals, we're looking at 9 months after that individual passes away themselves. So there's a little bit of a time crunch in coming up with that money if we're dealing with a taxable estate. Anything under those levels, that roughly 13 million right now, or if we go past 2026, roughly 6.5 to 7, is going to pass tax-free to your heirs. And what we want to discuss is how can that be most efficient, and what are the things that we want to be able to look out for. The first thing that I would say is most important when thinking about trust is setting it up to avoid probate. Probate, that's going to be the procedure that everyone has to go through if they have a will or if they die without a will. With a will, it's going to be testate. Without a will, it's going to be an intestate proceeding. And those are going to be not only invasive to the individuals that you're leaving the estate to, but it's also going to be public. I can go down right now to the Dallas County Courthouse and pull any probate that has ever been gone through there or that is currently pending. And I can see not only the will to see where everything goes from that individual, but I can also see an inventory of all of the assets. So if somebody is a fraudster and they want to take advantage of somebody, they could take a look and see this person has a lot of assets coming to them. And I'm going to know by that inventory exactly what that is. I can then look at the will and see exactly what is left of those assets to those individuals, get their name, get their address, all from these public filings. That's going to be the biggest thing about a trust. That's going to be different. A trust is a private contract between you and pretty much yourself and the trustee. Those are the parties that are at play. During your life, if we're doing a revocable living trust, you're going to act as your own trustee. It's not going to be something that's very fancy. A lot of people hear trust, they think negative connotations, they think it's very, very complex. A revocable living trust is essentially a will replacement, but what it's going to do is it's going to avoid probate. We're not going to have to go through the court system to actually pass these assets, as long as the assets are titled in the name of the trust. And that's going to be the biggest thing to remember when setting up a revocable living trust, making sure that those assets are actually put into the trust, because it can only control what is inside of it. If things are left out, we're going to have to go through that probate process to get those assets into the trust. Something that's going to be more beneficial about the latter scenario that I just said, where we're having to go through probate to get assets into the trust, is it's going to say, put them into my revocable living trust. It's not going to name actual individuals. So the court filings, everything of that nature will not reveal who the ultimate beneficiaries are, because this is a private contract. So for privacy purposes, these revocable living trusts are going to be a great way to go. If we're thinking about doing gifting, that 12.96 that I mentioned earlier, if we give that full amount right now to someone, the IRS has said that they will not come back and tax that later. Meaning, if we live past 2026, which hopefully everybody on this call will be, we would not then be subject to taxes on the amount that we had given away up to that 12.96 million. The IRS is a regulation that has come back and said, we're not doing that. So we're calling it our bonus exemption. If you have the ability to gift over that $6 million, $7 million mark, we need to be doing that now. And we can either do that to spouses through a spousal lifetime access trust, or generation skipping trust, whatever it may be. But we do need to look at making those gifts now. And these different irrevocable trusts are going to be a great vehicle to do that gifting to, because you can still control it. What all trusts are going to have is they're going to have you have the security of knowing that you as the grantor, your wishes are going to be carried out, because that's the role of the trustee. The trustee has a fiduciary duty to abide by the terms of the document and to actually make sure that all of your wishes are coming to fruition. If they do not do that, the beneficiaries have the ability to sue that individual. If they're not giving out as much money as they should be, or vice versa, if they're giving out too much money to a certain generation and not thinking about the next generation does have the ability to go after that individual. So you know that you have protection there. Another thing with irrevocable trust that you're going to get, and that I'll hit on a little bit later, is creditor protection. If we set up a trust that's irrevocable for the benefit of our children, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to secure their future from potential creditors. If they were a small business owner and that business were to go bankrupt, the creditors of that business, they can't get at the dollars in that trust. That can still be there to provide for their future going forward. Another common scenario that we see creditors protection in is divorce. If one of our children get divorced, the divorcing spouse will have no right to access these funds that are held inside of an irrevocable trust. This also works for a car accident. If the provisions are tailored correctly and we have the correct choice of a trustee, the beneficiary not being the trustee with full discretion to give to themselves, we can actually protect from potential creditors. You get in a car accident, they sue your child for $1 million. That you go to the trustee and say, hey, I need $1 million to pay this judgment. The trustee is going to say no. This money is going to stay in this vehicle and be creditor protected going forward. So those are just a few of the benefits, and we'll dive deeper into all of those. But I wanted to give a general understanding of what is the trust and really what we can do with them for not only tax mitigation purposes, but other benefits that we see. Matt, next slide, please. So just to go over a few more of the benefits, one thing that we want to talk about is continuity and also reducing the burden on family members. So once we name somebody as the executor or trustee of this, there's going to be a lot that they're going to have to do. And there's going to be a steep learning curve on when they're going to be able to do it. Also, when we're thinking about naming a trustee, typically we think a family friend or potentially a sibling of ours. If we're going to be older when we pass away, this might not be good for continuity purposes. We may want to think of somebody or potentially a corporation that can come in and abide by this, ensuring continuity in the fact that they know that they can go to this one place for all of their distributions instead of having somebody who maybe they're 80 years old when they take over the trusteeship, 90 years old. They may not want to do that at that point. So we're going to get a revolving door potentially of different trustees. So make sure we're keeping that in mind when we are selecting the actual trustee of the trust. Another thing that we want to make sure that we're going to do in selecting that trustee is making sure this person's trustworthy. Also, we want to make sure that they themselves have some assets in case things do go wrong. We've seen a lot of instances where somebody has chosen a trustee, they've mismanaged those funds, and then they've taken off with them. And if we don't have any recourse against that, if they've then sold the assets or squandered the money that is in this trust, we don't have any legal recourse to get it back. So think about that when we're choosing these trustees, and mostly we're thinking about the trustees either after we pass or for those irrevocable trusts that we have discussed. Next slide, please. So the different ways that we can be associated with trusts are not only as the grantor in the ones that's creating it. We can also be a beneficiary. If you're a beneficiary of a current trust, making sure that that trust is set up to actually benefit you. And we need to go over the terms of that trust to say, hey, is this getting done what we need it to? And a lot of times we'll see that things are maybe invested not in a way that's conducive to the terms of the trust. Let's say you're an income beneficiary, but everything is put into growth stocks. There's not a lot of these high yield bonds that Matt was talking about, or dividend paying stocks potentially that could get you some money in retirement. We want to be able to take a look at that and discuss with the trustee a different way of shifting how things are invested. Another thing that we may want to look at, if the terms are very restrictive on what we're able to get access to, we can actually change the terms of the trust as long as they do not frustrate the purpose of that trust. And what I mean by frustrate the purpose is, as long as it's not materially changing what this trust was set up to do, we can change certain provisions, such as adding a removal and appointment provision for a trustee that we don't like. Or, like I said, with the investments, being able to either broaden or more narrowly tailor how this trust operates. And those are done through non-judicial settlement agreements. So we do have mechanisms that we can use that we're able to change trust terms. So if you are the beneficiary of an irrevocable trust, don't think that you're stuck with the way that it's operating right now. If it's not working for you and we have the buy-in of other beneficiaries, we can go ahead and either change that judicially by going to court, which is not the most favored, or non-judicially, as long as everyone's signing off, and we can stay within these narrowly tailored provisions for what we can and can't do. Other ways that you can be associated with trust is trustee, like I talked earlier. Potentially a trust protector, which is going to be a provision that's really popular lately. What this one is it is an individual who's there to look out for the beneficiary. They're not serving in a fiduciary role, but what they're there to do is make sure that the trust or the trustee is working for them. If there's a conflict with the trustee, oftentimes a trust protector has the ability to remove and replace that trustee. They can take them out, they can name somebody else. There's also investment or distribution advisor. This comes in a lot of times very handy. If someone has some very odd assets, let's say we have a high concentration of oil and gas or collectibles, or we have some farmland where one individual is going to know how to handle that more than others, we're going to want to put an investment advisor in there, because a typical trustee has the duty to diversify. And if we have this large concentration and we want to keep it that way, the investment advisor can direct that trustee into how they want the funds invested for that trust. So the same as with the distribution advisor. Maybe the trustee that we chose isn't too close to the family, but they're the most responsible person. The distribution advisor is somebody that we would name that's very close to the family, knows all of these beneficiaries. And what we want to do is we want to be able to tell them, hey, no, this isn't a good distribution. This person's maybe been struggling with drugs and alcohol. Maybe this other person is a real spendthrift. Anything that they touch, it's immediately gone. The distribution advisor can give their input on whether these distributions are going to be good for that individual. So there's a lot of different ways where you can be associated with trust, or thinking about setting up your own. You can have these other individuals be part of the entire trust relationship. Next slide, please, Matthew. When we're talking about the irrevocable trust, a lot of people think that that means that they cannot move it, or they think that they can't do anything about it because it has that word irrevocable. As I just said, we have those non-judicial settlement agreements as a break in case of emergency type of lever that we can pull. But what a lot of people don't understand is there are a lot of mechanisms, either with state law or in the document itself, where we can move this trust to a financial advisor or a trustee that is going to be more conducive to what we want. People think that this word irrevocable means you can't do anything about it. It's the most common misconception I come up with. And what we really want to do is we want to take a look at the language in the trust and say, okay, is there some way where this trustee that's not getting it done for us, or this financial advisor who doesn't understand our goals and objectives, can we get it out of their hands and get it into someone's hands that can really help us with our situation? And I'm here to tell you that it's not a matter of if we can do it, it's a matter of how many hoops are we going to have to jump through to get that done. These are all going to be movable. It just is going to depend on which mechanisms we're going to do. And by bringing me and my team these existing trusts, I can provide a roadmap for you into how this can be done. I can tell you all of the hoops that we'll have to go through to get this over to an individual that's more well suited to fit your needs. And that's going to be a part of the service that we provide here. Other times, what we're going to talk about on the next slide is it may require a corporate trustee. You look at a document and you'll see this requirement says a corporate trustee is necessary for the administration of this trust. And when people think corporate trustees, they think big, large institutions, your Bank of America's, Wells Fargo's, BOK. Those institutions are going to be the ones that will also have to have the assets be custodied there. They're not going to let you work with your independent advisor. The way that our institution teams with independent advisors like ChappelWood is that they're able to be on as your trusted advisor, and all we'll step in for is the actual management of the trust itself. We're not going to be the ones that say everything needs to come over to us. You're going to be able to work with the people you know and trust. And that works for not only existing trusts, but trusts that are going to be administered after you pass away. People here at ChappelWood, they've got you to retirement. They've got you through all of these large events. We want to be able to make sure that that relationship then goes to the next generation. There's a statistic that says 80% of the time that an individual inherits money, they're either going to invest it themselves or take it to a different financial advisor. So if you want the individuals that you have worked with your entire life to stay on that relationship and ensure that that's going to happen, we can put a corporate trustee in there that can work with ChappelWood to make sure that this team that got you to the wealth that you aspired to is going to be there for the next generation to be able to coach them going forward. So just very important in the team continuity aspect here. Next slide, please. Again, this one just goes to understanding your options in making sure that the trust is working for you. And it's not just a collection of words and you are just getting these checks every month, or you're in the individuals that you have named as your beneficiaries are going to be the ones who inherit it subject to creditors, or inherit it without the most or the least tax implications. We want to make sure that those are all things that we discuss and understand your different options when setting up a trust. The biggest thing on this is family dynamics. We see it all the time, where an individual will name their son or daughter, and the other people in the family will have this perception of power. Daughter is named trustee, son is the beneficiary of this trust. He thinks that his sister has this power over him when it comes to his finances. We want to stay away from that as much as possible, especially if maybe that relationship's already a little bit fractured. I had an instance recently where we got the plan of these individuals, and they had set up a trust where daughter was the trustee of son's trust, and son was the trustee of daughter's trust. They already had a little bit of a rift and a power struggle between the two. How do we think that's going to play out now that they're controlling the other's finances from mom and dad? We've talked to them about really the pitfalls that can come along with if someone denies a distribution request, what that's going to look like as on retribution, good, bad, or indifferent, and getting away from that. Maybe getting that neutral third party is going to be something that we want to be able to look at. So family dynamic issues, they come into play a lot in this space, and it's something that we really like to talk about and feel that you can feel open discussing it with us, because we want this to be something that's not going to bring more anxiety, more angst between siblings after you pass away. When mom and dad are not there to, kind of referee these fights, we want to make sure that this relationship isn't getting fractured anymore. We want to make sure that everybody is still having Thanksgiving dinner together, even though mom and dad have passed away, and that the financial aspect isn't getting in the way of that family harmony. And then next slide. The most common thing that I'll hear is people saying, well, I don't have enough money to need planning or to need a trust. And I'm here to tell you that it's not all about that. Yes, there are certain advantages with the federal estate and state estate taxes that we can get around with these trusts, but it's more on the soft factors. And the soft factors can also include special needs trusts. If we're going to give any money to an individual who has special needs or is on government assistance, we need to have that conversation right now. This is something that I personally have a soft spot for. My aunt is special needs, and if I didn't go into this line of work, my family would have been in a heap of trouble when my grandfather passed away. My grandfather's will originally said, leave half of my assets to one daughter, half of my assets to another daughter. Well, my aunt, she has been in an assisted living place for over 25 years now. She has the mental capacity of a sixth grader. And if that money were to hit her account, what would happen is she would have got kicked off of government benefits. She would have been kicked out of her assisted living place because that place is only for individuals who are on government assistance. What then would have happened is we would have had to spend down the entire amount of money that was left to her to get her back to a level where she would qualify for government assistance. There's also a look back period that we would have had to wait before we could reapply to qualify for that government assistance for her. On top of that, we then would have had to reapply to get her into the assisted living facility. There's about a 10-year wait list. You can just imagine the stress and everything that would have been put on my mother and the rest of our surviving family having to go through that. And not only that, but the stress it would have put on this special needs individual who's lived in the same spot for 25 years. And instead, we were able to set up a special needs trust. So now whenever my aunt goes to the doctor and they say, hey, she needs a new bed or she needs a special type of diet, we're able to access the trust for money that is going to provide for needs above and beyond government assistance. I can't tell you how much this has enriched her life. We can send her on vacations with chaperones. That can be paid out of the special needs trust. We can get her certain types of vehicles to drive her around instead of having to rely on public transportation. Because these benefits, they're not much, but they're definitely needed, especially on the medical side. So if we have anyone who is in our lives that has special needs or that we're thinking about sending money to eventually, please let us know. We need to get these mechanisms set up in place. Another thing that we'll just hit on once again is that family harmony, making sure that it's not about the amount of money that we're passing, it's just about how it's going to be controlled. And that'll bring us into the next slide of really making sure that the beneficiaries are financially responsible. How people respond to death, how they respond to an influx of money, that's probably been the saddest part of going into this line of work that I decided to go into. You'll see times where people respond to death and they grieve in different ways. And a lot of times they're taking it out on the executor. They're taking it out on the trustee. And that's not necessarily fair, but it's just their grieving process. They have anger and they're wondering why this happened. Well, that can end up fracturing the relationship between that individual and whoever the trustee is going forward. It might not be about the painting or the flatware or the china, but things will be said during the divvying up of these assets where we're just saying things that we can't take back. And it's really kind of an ugly way that people do respond to it, but it's a part of the human process. So if we can take that dynamic out and potentially get a neutral third party in there, we're going to go ahead and want to do that, because of the fact of you want to be somebody completely neutral or a corporation, so that relationship can go on between the family members instead of getting fractured. Also, people responding to an influx of money. I can't tell you how many times I've been settling an estate, and all of a sudden I get a call from one of the beneficiaries and they say, hey, I need a distribution. I've been spending some money. I bought a boat. I bought some ATVs. I went and got a new hunting lease, this, that, and the other, because they're expecting all of this money to come to them, and it's already spent before it's even been divided up. What we want to do is we want to not only talk to the beneficiaries in a family meeting about how they're going to inherit, but we want to be able to set this up in trust so we can control them from going out and squandering the money. It's not that we're being mean. We can set them up with pretty liberal provisions that can provide for comfort, as we'll call it. There's also just the standard health, education, maintenance, and support, which is still pretty broad in itself. If you can tell me what maintenance and support is, you might be the first person that could clearly define that for me. Or we can go to a fully discretionary standard, which is very wide. And as long as we have a neutral third party as the trustee and not somebody that the beneficiary is in control of, which the IRS defines as family members or somebody subordinate to them, it could be a person that works for them, something where they can hold something over their head. A fully discretionary standard, we can give them money for whatever, but it also keeps that creditor protection. So we want to be able to make sure that this influx of money is not going to immediately be given away or immediately squandered when this individual does it. Another bullet point here on creditor protection, you'll see in a lot of trusts, and I'm guessing this is going to be true for many of you who are on this call who have trusts set up, that there are age attainment provisions. And that provision looks something like this. When the beneficiary turns 35 years old, give them 1/3 of the corpus of the trust. When they turn 45, go ahead and give them 1/2 of the remaining assets that are in the trust. And when they're 55 years old, give them the remaining assets free of trust. People do that because they don't want to be mean, once again, with the transferring of these assets. But a couple questions. Do divorces happen after 55 years old? Do car accidents happen after 55? Do bankruptcies happen after 55 years old? Of course they do, to all of those. So when we give that money outside of trust, we're immediately opening it up to the creditors. Those judgment creditors can get at anything in those individuals' personal names. And we've seen scenarios where a spouse knows, hey, my spouse is 53. 55, they get the rest of this trust. I can make this marriage work for a couple more years to be able to inherit that money. And you think I'm joking, but these types of nasty things come up very, very regularly. And we want to be able to protect that from those individuals. So why don't we take a different look at the age attainment? Why don't we expand the provisions? I just talked about health, education, maintenance, and support. Maybe make that the standard until they're 35. And then we expand it to a comfort standard at 45. And then at 55, that fully discretionary standard we discussed. We're not limiting their access as much, but we're keeping that creditor protection away from those life events that the beneficiaries are surely to have come up during their lives.
Hey, Rob.
Next, I just want to go.
I was going to say, Rob,
Yeah, go ahead.
you mentioned I could jump in if we got a question. And we seem to have kind of a common theme here. This is a question that was asked several times from people that pre-registered or had submitted their questions, and we've had it a few times here in the chat. And so this comes from Angela, but it's been asked by several. What taxes are we subject to from an inheritance?
So when you're inheriting money, it depends on the state of the individual that they live in. There's technically not an inheritance tax at the federal level. There's an estate tax, and if you're over that level, it's actually the estate itself, either the trust or the probate estate, that's going to pay that tax. When you're inheriting money, when the money actually comes to you, there's not going to be a tax there. There's actually going to be a big benefit when you're inheriting money if those dollars were in that person's estate. If someone passes away with, let's say, 1,000 shares of Amazon that they purchased 25 years ago, it's going to have a very low basis. But if that individual never sold those, what they'll get when they pass away is a step up in basis. So let's say they bought those shares for $20. Well, now it's going to go to your date of death value. And it's going to be whatever the stock price is on that date of death, you get a basis step up. So if you were to sell that the next day as the beneficiary, you're not going to realize any capital gains. It's going to wipe out any capital gains that happen. The place that we see this the most is with family homes. And somebody passes away with their house inside of their estate, gives it to a child. The child can go ahead and then sell that house, and it's going to wipe out any capital gain that the previous person had. So when inheriting money, it's not you that's actually going to be the one paying the taxes. If it is subject to either estate taxes, well, I will say with a caveat, there are certain states, I can think of Iowa has an inheritance tax, a few others, Nebraska, that do have that inheritance tax. That's going to be a little bit of a deeper dive. I don't want to dwell on those too much because it's not the norm. It's typically going to be an estate tax that the actual probate estate or revocable living trust is going to be the one paying if it's subject to it.
Thanks for that answer. And I will add one thing. If you inherit an IRA from somebody, so what you're talking about is maybe other property, but if you inherit an IRA from somebody, a traditional IRA, and there's any money left in it, remember that money hasn't been taxed yet. So if you inherit it, when you take it, it will absolutely be taxable to you. So you do need to understand that. If it's a Roth IRA, it will be tax-free, but traditional IRAs are taxable to the beneficiaries that inherit them.
And another thing just to point out on those qualified accounts is we're only going to have 10 years to be able to stretch that if we're somebody other than an individual with special needs or a surviving spouse. If we're a child of an individual with those plans, the Secure Act came into play a couple of years ago and got rid of the ability to stretch it out over our lifetime. So that tax hit could be pretty significant. If we need to drain this account in 10 years, there's $1 million in it, we're going to have to take out $100,000 a year, or we could decide to take out more than that in those years. But we do need to drain the entire balance of that account 10 years after the year in which that individual passed away. Perfect. So next thing that I want to address is just making sure that if you are named as an executor or you're named as a trustee, knowing what you're going to have to do in carrying out these different duties. And we do have a piece on this. You can reach out to Damon, Victoria, anyone at ChappelWood. or you can reach out to Matthew and say, hey, I do want to take a little deeper dive into this. It's kind of what to expect when you're expecting to be an executor. These are the things that you're going to have to do. These are the different tasks that you are going to be tasked with completing for that estate or for that trust. It's also good to look at from the lens of, hey, is this something that I want to have an individual do for me? Or what individual is best well suited to go ahead and complete these tasks of gathering the necessary documents, marshaling assets, divvying up the personal property, locating and inventorying all these assets, addressing any type of family needs, or doing the distribution. They're also going to need to learn about principal and income acts and how that's going to be needed to be allocated during the time where somebody is going to be serving as an individual executor and getting out the potential income to those people. So that's going to be a piece that we can go over. I know we're running a little short on time, so I want to get to your question. So make sure and reach out if you know that you're named as an executor or you're having a difficult time conceptualizing what it is that we want to be able to task these individuals who are our trustees going forward.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Damon.
let's use our last few minutes here to ask a few questions. So Rob, I'm going to direct another question here. This question came from John. We're planning on benefiting our children and grandchildren. How can we give to our children where it would be tax-free for them?
Yeah, and again, that's going to be making sure if we're under those amounts that I discussed, right? If we're under that 6.5 million to 7 million after 2026, then it's going to be tax-free given to them because we're also going to receive that step up in basis. If we're over that amount, what we need to start doing is we need to start looking at potentially gifting and taking advantage of this bonus exemption. Again, for a married couple, we're going to be able to pass up to $26 million tax-free before 2026. That's a lot. After that, it's going to be cut in half. But if we're butting up against those and we aren't subject to one of these states that has state-to-state tax, I can think of Washington State with a $2 million exemption, Oregon, $1 million. Essentially, if you own a very nice house around Oregon, you're going to be subject to a state tax. New York City, that have a fiscal cliff. It goes up to about 5.7 million. But if you have over that, everything is brought back in. So there are these nuances with assets and fortunes that have been made out of state. Texas and Oklahoma don't have that. So being able to pass it tax-free, that's going to be the most efficient from an estate tax standpoint. From an income tax standpoint, we want to make sure that all of those assets are in our estate so they receive that step up. Those capital gains get wiped out. You hit on the qualified plans. There's really nothing we can do there. I will say if you are charitably inclined, the best thing to do is to actually give money out of those qualified plans. And the reason we want to do that is because you're giving to 501c3. They're going to be exempt from income tax. So they're getting a dollar for dollar benefit of whatever we're leaving them. If we have something in our will that says leave $100,000 to the local church or the American Cancer Society, well, those dollars have already been taxed. We could give those away tax-free to our beneficiaries. Why would we want to then give $100,000 that's going to be subject to regular, ordinary income tax rates in our qualified plan? So for the charitably inclined, that's going to be one way that we can mitigate taxes. You're also going to get a deduction for that. It's going to, on our final tax returns, we're going to be able to have some deductions and reduce tax that way as well.
All right. Hey, Matthew, I've got one quick question for you. This comes from Jane. She's here on the webinar with us tonight. She says, some economists have been predicting recessions for over a year, and it hasn't happened. And job growth still stronger than forecast. Why does City National Rockdale still feel that a recession will happen?
So that is a great question and a great point. Coming out, we're going to take a quick trip through time, going back to just after the great financial crisis, call it circa 2009, 2010. A term was coined back then, and it went a little bit like this. I might mess this up a little bit, but it said investors. There was a lot of back and forth about where we were going and what we were doing. And the term that came out was "Don't fight the Fed." And what that referred to was investors trying to make plays and make calls based on intuition, but knowing full well what the Federal Reserve was planning on doing. At the time, it was keeping interest rates very, very low. And the term was "Don't fight the Fed." I'm giving you an incredibly long-winded answer, and I apologize for that. But at the end of the day, what we're doing here is we're not fighting the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve specifically set out to slow the economy down. They do that through a couple of tools. Their biggest tool is raising interest rates. And they've done that at a faster clip and a greater clip than they've done for over 20 years. Their intention was to slow down the economy, not drive it into a deep recession, but bring this down. We have continued to see very, very strong employment numbers, very, very strong spending. Small cracks in both of those have formed recently, and that's why we think we're still on our way to what we refer to again as a mild recession. But this is in no way, shape, or form an expectation of like another 2008. This is simply an economic slowdown. And what you could very well see is the entrance into that economic slowdown and not notice it really in the stock market, almost like a delayed recession. Like we already got the hit in the markets. That already happened. The economy actually does slow down and then, quote unquote, gets back to normal. But we're not fighting the Fed. They raise rates to crush inflation and to slow down the economy. And therefore, we think the economy is going to slow down. You're on mute.
I'm only the host. I don't know what I'm doing tonight. Okay, so if I could ask your permission, ladies and gentlemen, stick with us for just 5 more minutes. May I have 5 more minutes of your time? Because we do want to ask a couple more questions. But also, you'll notice here on the screen, usually what happens by this time when we host these webinars is you've got all this great information and your brain is about to melt down. It's gone full on nuclear and you're like, I don't know what to do here. What do I do next, Damon and Victoria and Lisa? It's not what do I do next, it's, okay, can you guys help me do what needs to come next? And the answer is, yeah, we can. Now, I will tell you that we are investment advisors to millionaires, and we can't do this for everybody. We know who we serve best, and the advice and the strategies and the time that we put into the relationships we build with our clients really works best for those of you that have saved at least $1 million. It doesn't mean we don't love the rest of you, but we know our lane. We stay in our lane. But of course, if you've got questions and you don't yet meet the $1 million or you don't own a business, we will certainly be happy to answer your questions, of course. But if you want to sit down and discuss these issues as well as others, taxes, what do I do with my retirement accounts when I retire? Or if I inherit money, what am I going to do with that? We can sit down with you. All you have to do, get your phone out, open your camera, scan the QR code. It's going to take you to a link. You hit that. You're going to see a page there with this beautiful, handsome man's face. Watch that short video. It's the ChappelWood Millionaire Experience. What you can expect when you work with ChappelWood Financial, whether you're in Oklahoma, whether you're in Texas, or anywhere in the United States. And then at the bottom of that screen is a button that you can push to schedule a 30-minute phone call. Just 30 minutes. We'll jump on the phone with you, a member of our advisory team, and we'll try to figure out how we can best help you to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve. We've got another question here. Rob, when is the best time to transfer ownership of a house to a son or daughter? Should one gift it through time or all at once?
I'll give you the typical attorney response here and say that it depends. I would say if there's a low basis in that house and we're looking to eliminate some capital gains, if these individuals are going to end up selling that in the future, the best time would be after you pass away, if that's going to be a part of your estate. If it's not, if let's say this is a lake house or something of that, one way that we're going to want to be able to do that is a family limited partnership. We can go ahead, set one of those up and give chunks of it over time. Because another exemption that I failed to mention earlier, but is very important, is the annual exemption. Each person can give any other person. if you guys are feeling like you want to give away money, you could give all of us $17,000 a year without paying any taxes on that, without it going against that lifetime exemption number. So when we divide this up into a family limited partnership share, if it's a married couple, what we can do is we can discount the value, and these are getting a little technical with the terms, but let's say it's $1 million home. Put it in a family limited partnership, we can take discounts for lack of marketability, lack of control, things of that nature, which can bring it down up to 30%. So now these shares, the full value is going to be $1 million, but in the IRS's eyes of the limited partnership shares, it's looking like only $700,000. And we can give away these little shares each and every year and transfer it to them over time. What we're going to want to make sure that we do is, in setting up a family limited partnership, is we're only giving away these limited partnership shares, because that's not going to give them the control to go ahead and sell the house out from under you. You don't want to get in a fight with the kids later on and they end up selling this house and telling you need to move. There are other things that we can do. Qualified personal residence trust, where we can give this to a trust, live in it for a number of years, and then we can actually pay rent to live in the house that we once owned. It's a good way to be able to give money to the next generation without it actually generating a gift, because of the fact that it's not gift, it's income to them, because we're paying money to this trust. And then we can set those up as grantor trust, so then we pay the taxes on it. These are all different ways that we can get this in a tax-free environment for those individuals going forward. The only issue with that is, when we transfer that into trust, we're not going to get that step up when we pass away. Right. So if we do have a very low basis in that home or in a farm, anything like that, we want to be cognizant of that. We don't want to be giving this away and then sticking them with a low basis for their entire life that they're going to have to pay large capital gains on in the future.
Rob, I'm shocked that you said that families fight over money. This is the first I'm hearing of this. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up with one final question. And this question is for the financial diva, who is going to take us home. And we're going to end with this. Victoria has put together a really great document. You can actually download this document on our website. It's ChappelWood.com. You can go to resources and click on brochures and reports. And right there on that page, you will find what's called the Survivor's Checklist. Victoria put this together, gosh, Victoria, how many, 20 years ago? More than that? I don't know. Yeah. And it's what you need to do right after you lose someone. So Victoria, this question was asked by Kyle, and I figured this would be a great way to end, and you can answer this question. What should be the first action taken after inheriting any kind of wealth?
Oh, talk to your financial advisor. That's so simple, because we don't take advice from broke people. I thought you were going to ask me, what is the first thing we do? And on the survivor's checklist, Damon, and Kyle, thank you for that question. On the survivor's checklist, the first thing I do is, of course, say, take care of your family. You spend that first 2 weeks. Don't worry about any of those things. And when you see that on the survivor's checklist at the top, then it's like, oh, okay, I can breathe. I just take care of my family right now. Take care of yourself, take care of them. All these things can wait, but there is a specific list of what you should do, in the first month, what you should do 6 months from now. So it's not overwhelming. And this has been accumulated over years. We've updated it. We had some circumstances where spouses did not share logins. And so we've had to hack into computers to get to information. So, it's important for someone to know these things. And it's a very simple list, but it's very thorough. Not everything will pertain to you. Like there's things on there for veterans. If you have VA benefits, that, people don't think about that. And we add that. So not everything will probably pertain to you, but you can go through this and it's step by step. So you feel very confident. And of course, you always have us to call, but you feel very confident in knowing, oh, that can wait 3 months, 6 months. These are the things that I need to do right away. But when you do inherit a large sum or you're anticipating it, even more importantly, is talk to your advisor before the act. That's why we work with our clients, so that before this happens, we anticipate it. So we're already thinking about, okay, if we inherit a certain dollar amount, then how are we going to blend that in and create a different type of portfolio? Especially when a spouse passes away, we know we're going to inherit this. And I'm thinking of 2 clients right now where this happened. And now we need to sit down and we need to have a whole different discovery, because life has happened and it changes. So the first thing you do is obviously sit down with your financial advisor, get your estate plan in place so that you can have confidence in moving forward. And you're not behind the 8 ball. You've pre-planned, and that's what we do so well here at ChappelWood. So thank you all for being with us. I've loved it. I can't believe I worked so hard to get healthy, and I actually think I turned the corner today.
Well, there you go. We want to thank you all so much for being with us tonight. We know it's time away from your family, time away from other things that you would rather do, but clearly you found this valuable. We are going to send this out to all of you that registered, those of you that were here tonight, and then you can share that with anybody else that you know needs this information. Go ahead. I'll keep this QR code up on the screen for a little bit. Schedule your 30-minute second opinion phone call with us here at ChappelWood Financial. And whether you're in Oklahoma, Texas, or anywhere in the country, we can certainly help you to address any of the financial needs for you and your family. Thanks so much, Rob and Matthew, for joining us tonight with City National Rockdale.
Thank you both so much. Can't wait to see
partnership.
you, Rob, in Oklahoma City on October 26th. You will be here live and in person.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And I have somebody that's going to, well, I'm just going to leave that as a surprise. I have somebody coming that I confirmed today that's going to be a surprise for you and make you a rock star.
All right.
Perfect.
Can't wait for that. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a great
Thanks, Lisa.
And
Thanks,
we're-
Matthew.
And we're going to leave you with the
Rob, yeah, take care.
very best advice of all time. Don't take advice from broke people, physically, financially, or spiritually. Good night.